Welcome to Playful Presence, conversations about creativity, mindfulness, and play. I'm your host, Taj Baker. I'm an artist, meditator, and coach. The idea behind this podcast is that these conversations with working creatives will give you tips and tricks and new perspectives to aid you in your creative journey and in your life in general. If you'd like to get my newsletter, you can go to tajbaker.com. This episode is the second part of my conversation with Jamie Catto, musician, filmmaker, and raconteur, and I hope you enjoy it.
When I was in this posh school from 13 to 18, it was the best school you could ever, even though it was a very academic school. It was the same school that Helena Bonham Carter went to, and Louis Theroux, and millions of people. And the amazing thing about this school, even though I didn't want to be boarding there because I only lived 10 minutes away, but it was so in the center of London that 1 mile away to the north was the National Gallery with all the Leonardo da Vinci and Michelangelo and Donatello and all the incredible artists. 1 mile in the other direction was the Tate Gallery with all the Jackson Pollock and the Rothko and the Van Gogh and the more modern stuff. 1 mile in the other direction from the school was Shaftesbury Avenue, the theatre district, with all the latest plays and, John Malkovich, incredible. And 1 mile in the other direction was the Royal Festival Hall with all the orchestras and the flamenco and the Bulgarian lap singing. So you had surrounded you the most cream of world culture all the time. And because it was such a posh school, anything you wanted to go and see, you just put your name down outside the housemaster's study. You wrote down, I want to go and see Burn This with John Malkovich. The next day there'd be 2 tickets waiting for you, and it was all just put on your bill.
Wow.
Your parents to pay. And so I would see an orchestra every week. Go and see the Royal Philharmonic playing the Brahms Violin Concerto. And I didn't care whether I knew the piece or not. Being in the presence of an orchestra is just the most extraordinary thing. It turns me on so much because you've got like 128 musicians, right? And each one of them, I used to just look at each one as if I was like sort of traveling into their skull, traveling into their history. That each one of them, look at the second bassoon player or something. He got up every morning. He did his practice in Copenhagen where he grew up, and his dad used to make him practice after school and go and do his grading exams in somewhere in Denmark. He's got a whole story of all the work he's put in, all the whole history of being a child and playing and music lessons and gradings and parents making you practice and everything that's led him to tonight of him being second bassoon in the Royal Philharmonic playing the Brahms Violin. You go into somebody else, look at the lead violin or one of the cellos, and they're from another place, and they've had a whole different history of music lessons and gradings and parents making them practice and little orchestras they've played in when they were 11 or whatever. You've got 128 stories who are all coming together on this one night to make this incredible, godlike sound of a whole orchestra playing the Brahms Violin Concerto. This ecstatic, incredible journey of music and sound, all made by 128 journeys. And when you got tickets to these things, they were these special kind of cheapy tickets that they would sit you actually behind the orchestra. So you could see the whole audience of the Royal Festival Hall, and you were sitting like in the choir stalls behind the orchestra. So you could sit behind the timpani player and follow the music of all his beats. You could follow the whole concerto or the whole symphony and see all the timpani drum beats and watch his music sheet and follow it with him playing it. It was so exciting and such a privilege.
What a rich education. And it feels like you really got this bird's eye view, this really close-up view of the balance between discipline and inspiration.
Yeah, I've never been big on discipline, if I'm honest. When I'm going to do a new project, like I decided that I've had an idea for an album I want to make or something, I have to do it with someone else or I won't do it. Like I have to invite someone to come to the studio, or come to my house, whatever, 11 o'clock Monday morning, and then they show up, and then it's just too embarrassing not to get on with some work. That's the only way that I can really get on with stuff, is if I put myself in a position where it's too embarrassing not to.
That I really resonate with that. When I first got the idea to create this show, it was an idea for quite a while. And then I submitted it to KBOO here in Portland to become a monthly radio show. And that's when it started to happen, when I had a deadline.
That sounds that kind of makes sense.
Yeah, some people are able to just go off and play and create, and others, like it sounds like you and me, need some structure to make it happen.
Yeah, definitely.
Even just an accountability buddy, just to get somebody in your life who will ask you, well, did you do that thing you said you were going to do? It can
Yeah,
be that little, but also playing with others. Like I said, we've a lot in our culture turned play into something that's just for kids, and that's really sad because throughout our lives, we need play.
yeah. That may be still quite true, but it's not nearly as true as it used to be. There's a lot more play now with the internet and with gamers,
Mm.
with all kinds of more opportunities to be creative. So many people now, like my kids, whatever, they film all kinds of things on their phone. They edit them into little kind of vignettes.
Mm.
Like even like my youngest is 17. It's one of her pal's birthday. You look on her Instagram and she's made a little photo montage or little bits of video with a hip hop beat behind it of a minute and a half. And it's happy birthday, Tommy. That's pretty creative. And I don't think she's especially creative. I just think kids now they don't think twice about filming things and cutting them together and putting music behind them. And so I think the more of this technology that's making it easier and easier for people to create, I think is a really, really good thing. A lot easier to make music, a lot easier to cut little movie things together, a lot easier to play games with each other. I've got an app. It stopped working actually, annoyingly, but until it stopped working, it was brilliant. It's the Scrabble app. And you can just press, find me someone, and they'll find you either one of your friends or somebody far away in,
Mhm.
Texas or something, will be up for playing Scrabble with you. There's a lot more possibilities for us to play at the moment. I feel really good about it. I mean, I still think people are really screwed up and uptight around playing, and that's something we have to work on. But there's a lot more opportunity.
Yeah, I think one thing that is really important for people to notice is competitive play is very much approved of in our world, with sports and everything, but collaborative play, not as much.
Mm.
And I think that's where a lot of the juice is, where you're working with other people, that basic idea in improv to make the people that you're working with feel good. And there's something magical that happens when that is one of the ground rules.
Yeah, I always say like being in a band is so wonderful because great music is made from friendship and admiration. And when you're playing in a band and then your best friend starts rocking out on the guitar solo and you're just like egging them on, and you're like totally with them, like rocking out with them, loving what they're doing. So you're admiring them and you're also best friends, you're also like kind of upholding them. It's a wonderful, wonderful thing. Being in a band is it's just so wonderful. Even if you're crap, it's just such a great feeling being in a band. And I really
Mm.
recommend, I really miss it, like a lot of the stuff I do now, especially with the teaching and stuff, it's quite of a lonely thing. Even if you have an amazing retreat and you've got 100 people and everyone's high as a kite at the end and having an amazing time, you still leave and you go back to your little hotel room or your little Airbnb and eat a curry by yourself. But when you're in a band and you have a really great experience, then you all jump on the tour bus together and you all like have a bit of a party and have the shared victory. It's much, much better.
Yeah, I've had that same type of experience as a painter where for years, painting usually, unless you're painting at an event, people who do the live painting thing that's gotten big now, you go off by yourself and you're painting, and it's not something that you can really share with anybody. But I've found a couple different ways around that. One was to become a henna artist so that I was painting on people, and that
Hmm.
was pretty fun. I did that full time for a couple years. And the other
Yeah.
was last summer, I was in a relationship where he had some time on his hands and was spending about a month or so with me here in Portland while I was painting every day. And he was my muse. It's felt like the relationship was pulling some art out of me that never would have happened otherwise. It was pretty amazing. It was like we had opened a portal together, and it
Wow.
was magical to have somebody on that journey with me who really got it, who could talk about the work. It's
Sounds
something that I
wonderful.
hadn't experienced before.
Oh, that's so cool.
Yeah. And it was hard when that ended, but also the art that I feel like we created it together, although I painted it, that was something that is an experience I will always cherish.
Wow, that's really cool.
So, in one of the interviews with you, I heard you say the phrase God's death waiters, and I'm curious about what that means for you.
Okay. I was just talking about this yesterday, actually. God's deaf waiters. Okay. So the idea is that all around the room that you're in, maybe invisible to the naked eye, are God's deaf waiters, which means that there are all these beings and entities that are just waiting to bring you incredible luck and resources and abundance for whatever project you're doing. But the problem is that they're deaf. They can't hear you saying what you want. They can't hear you saying what you're going to do when. They can only see your actions. And when they see you actually taking action on something, they go, ah, Amy's doing one of these. She's going to need one of those. And things magically appear in your path when you start actually taking the action to walk down that path and do things and call people and get people together to work or paint the thing or make the storyboard or shoot a demo or record the song on your phone. Or the moment you actually start taking action on things, then the God's deaf waiters see you doing it, and they start bringing you luck and abundance and resources. But they can only do it when you take action. No one is going to do that when they just hear you talking about it.
Makes me think of Rob Bresney's term pronoia.
Yeah, love that. The sneaking suspicion that that person across the road is doing something that's going to make your life better.
Yeah, not just that person, but the universe is out to help you.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's beautiful. I had an experience of that where this is about 10 years ago now. I had just been through a breakup and was on my way to the theater for a final performance of my improv class. And I was a fairly new improviser, so being in front of people was pretty new. And my hands were shaking on the steering wheel. I was like, oh my God, what if I get up there and I just, I'm too fragile to handle this, or if I cry or something. But I thought, no, I'm going to go because my teammates, my classmates are, counting on me. And then I remembered this joke that a friend of mine had told me. He had been at a retreat and somebody was limping. This woman was limping as they were all walking from one building to another. And he hung back and he asked her if she was okay. And she said, I'm all right, but I have a false limb from the knee up. So I'm thinking of that joke and I think, no, you cannot plan improv. That's just totally goes against everything that improv stands for. So I get to the theater and step out for my first scene with somebody and he says, "All matey, are you ready for the pirate games?" And I know I have a terrible pirate accent. And I say, well, I've got my eye patch and I got my parrot, so I guess I'm ready. And he said, the first event is the three-legged race. Have you got your false leg? And I look around like, wait a second, this couldn't be happening. He just set me up for that
Oh
line.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah. So I said it and I got the biggest laugh of the night. And
yeah.
it felt like,
You. Oh,
the universe had my back. It was pretty amazing.
yeah,
Definitely an example of pronoia.
yeah. I've had so many moments where I've just been so looked after. It's miraculous.
Now we're going to take a short break for me to tell you a little bit about coaching. The people who come to me often want some kind of a change in their life. It might be in their work life, in their creative life, in their relationships, and maybe they have a really clear idea of what they want, or they might not know, but they just know they want to change. Imagine that there's all these different parts inside you. And it's like these parts are people who are hiking up a mountain and they're tethered together with a rope. The pace of moving toward the top of the mountain, towards your goal, is going to be dictated or decided by the slowest one in that chain. It might be the part of you that's afraid to change or unwilling or in some way just isn't on board with moving towards your goal. And in the coaching work that I do with people, we get to know that straggler part. We befriend that part of you. We learn about what is it that would help that part feel safe and willing and ready to move towards the goal. At times this might be hard or challenging, but I have learned over time with my own process and with working with clients, it has to be fun. It has to be playful and creative, or else it's not going to happen. So imagine that you've gone through this process, you've been working with me for a while, and now moving toward your goal feels a lot less effortful. It feels like that straggler part is now on board, and instead of being dead weight pulling backward, it's actually moving forward with you. So if this resonates for you and you're interested in exploring the idea of coaching using creativity, mindfulness, and play to move forward with your goals, I would like to offer you a free online coaching session. Go to tajbaker.com and you can book a free session to try out coaching with me and see if we'd be a good fit. Now let's get back to the conversation.
I once, and this is actually one of the things I also talk about in creative workshops, is that I've never once got the budget for any of my projects from the meeting I was supposed to be in. It's never happened once in my whole career. Every budget I've ever been given, never once was I given that budget in the meeting where we were talking about that budget. It's always been I was in a meeting for something else. We finished talking about what we were talking about, but just before we left, we started talking about something else. Like after the first One Giant Leap movie, I was lucky enough to meet one of my heroines, the singer Annie Lennox. And she really loved One Giant Leap. So she was like, "Oh, will you direct all the videos for my new album?" And I was like, "Oh, God, I'll have to check my diary." I was like, "Oh my God, direct Annie's
Wow.
video. Miraculous." And so I spent some months with her in the studio and we were playing all this stuff. She said, "You've got to meet my manager, Simon Fuller." So I went to go meet him and show him the storyboards. The one and only time in my life I ever did storyboards. I'm not a storyboard person. And I went to meet him, not having done any due diligence, not realizing that he was a massive entertainment mogul and that he did the Spice Girls and X Factor and Pop Idol and many, many other things. I had no idea. I just thought he was some manager. And so as I went in, he said, "We're not doing these videos. I'm so sorry, but there's been an argument with the American label, and I won't tell you all the details, but we can't do them." And I was so gutted the one time you get asked by Annie Lennox to do the videos, it falls through because of some budget argument. But then we got talking about, he goes, what do you do with the next One Giant Leap? And I was like, oh, I wasn't pitching to him because there's no way he would be interested. He's Mr. Pop. He's not going to be interested in something which is spirituality and world music. He can be further away. So I was just saying, oh, we never want another record deal. It's like a bank with the worst interest rate in the world. We just want a backer, our genius, their money, 50-50. That feels fine. He goes, yeah, I love One Giant Leap. He goes, you see that guy through the glass over there? That's my head of accounts. Go and show him your numbers. And the next lunchtime, the next day, they gave me $3 million.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
That's not unusual for me. I mean, 3 million is unusual, but it's always like that. I go and talk to people about one thing, and I ended up walking out having got a budget or made a relationship for something else.
And I think that's because you're not that kind of desperation people can smell, that kind of feeling of like you're just open and being present with them.
Yeah.
And they appreciate your work. So the combination of those two things is powerful.
Yeah, maybe. I don't really analyze it. I mean, I'd love that to be true, what you've just said. I'll take the compliment.
Well, I
But
can imagine if you had gone in there to ask for the money and you were feeling uptight about it, then that they would feel that. But
no
because
way.
you were just being authentic,
Yeah.
and obviously you have the talent to back it up and they've seen your work already, then that sells it.
Yeah. No, I'm a really big believer. You must always, if you're in any kind of a meeting where somebody has resources for you, you can't have the attitude that you need their money to do your thing. You have to radiate that you're doing it anyway, not in a rebellious fuck you way, but you need to radiate that you're doing this anyway, no matter what. And they happen to be maybe a part of it. And that's lovely, but it doesn't depend on their interest at all.
Yeah. So I'd like to talk a little bit more about your approach to helping people to become more creative. A lot of what you do is shadow work experiences, as we've touched on.
Yeah.
How did you come to that?
Well, the second One Giant Leap film had big problems with the release. And it was when the world was going into a sort of a financial collapse around 2008, 2009. And, the budgets weren't there. And basically, I had to think of something else to do for a bit. And my girlfriend at the time said, well, why don't you do something instead of waiting for the phone to ring to produce the next album or the next movie? Why don't you do something else and see who comes, And I was like what? She goes, why don't you do some sort of a workshop, see who rocks up? And I looked at her with like this withering contempt. I was like, fuck you. I am not a workshop leader. I was like disgusted. 6 months later, nothing much had happened. So I was living in this little village in a Spanish island called Mallorca at the time. So I thought, fuck it, well, what would I do if I was going to do a workshop? And I think the only thing I know how to do is make projects, like have a wacky idea, but actually follow it through and get it done. So because my last movie was called What About Me, I devised a workshop called What About You to bring your creative project into the world. And I thought I'd try it out. Anyway, 40 people flew into the island to do it. I was just thinking like, oh, we'll see who comes. And we had this most amazing weekend. But the way I devised the weekend was it was a very practical, creative thing. But I realized that once again, as I was saying about shadow work, if you're some really edited, uptight, apologetic, sort of disempowered person around your creativity or around your optimism for life, you're not going to do any kind of a good project. It's that freedom, it's that unedited, boundaryless kind of leap off the cliff and see what happens mystery that is what makes great creativity. So I realized that the first of the 2-day workshops, you had to get everyone into that state so that the second day of creating would be at all interesting. So I accidentally fell into shadow work and all these other processes that I kind of thought I had invented, but then my reading subsequent to that showed me that lots of people had invented it before me. I thought I made up shadow work. I thought I made up parts work, but then I discovered internal family systems 5 years later, and I was very pissed off. How dare they come into my workshops, I thought, and then looked at the date and realized they were like 20 years before me. But I thought I'd invented it and was ways to get people to loosen up and to claim back more of their treasure and be a more unedited version of themselves before we started creating. And then I found that those days were more interesting than the creative days. So for years after that, I only did the shadow work and going at creativity via that rather than the practicalities of how to do a project. That became much more of a back seat.
So when you're talking about taking away these things that get in the way of creativity, it reminds me of the Rumi poem. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Guest house?
Your task is not to seek for love, but
Oh,
merely
yeah.
to seek and find all the barriers within yourself that you have built against it.
Yeah, that's perfect. So you could say substitute love for creativity there, and you've got
Yes.
exactly the same truth.
Yes. Because we are naturally creative beings. Everybody is a creative, not just the
Yeah, it's what
people
we're
who.
made of. We may not be artistic. Not everyone's artistic, but everyone's creative.
Yes. Yeah, and it goes back to that Ram Dass, that idea of being told certain things are successful. You look good as this type or that type in the world.
Yeah, we're so addicted to approval that we
Mhm.
will sacrifice huge parts of ourselves just to not ever risk disapproval or being seen as anything other than perfect. It's so tragic.
Yeah, and for anybody who doesn't know, internal family systems is this beautiful way of befriending the parts inside of ourselves that don't always have a voice. Like the inner critic, for instance, might be
Yeah,
trying to protect us from getting hurt. And maybe in the
yeah.
past
They
when we
all
were
think they're
young,
helping. All the
yeah,
crazy characters in the head think they're helping, and what we need to
yeah,
do is lovingly relieve them of duty or
yeah.
repurpose them, give them new jobs, and take on the job ourselves as adults. I mean, that's what the whole of my school, the Insanely Gifted School, is based on.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people have this idea that we are a monolith, we are one identity, but really there's so many parts inside of us that want different things. And when we start to communicate with those parts, we can find out that we have a lot more freedom to do the things that were hard to do before.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. And some of these parts need our love and attention.
They're all good.
Yeah.
They're all like little beings that were given jobs when we were very young, and they still think with the thoughts of a child. And they never got given new data to tell them to stop doing that thing.
And in this practice that I do, which is called focusing, we learn to be the self in presence with those parts. So it's a mindfulness practice as well, to be a container. Instead of saying, for instance, I am angry, you might say, I'm noticing something in me that's angry. And then you
Yeah,
can be a loving parent to that part and listen to it and let it have its tantrum
absolutely.
without
Wonderful.
it taking over, without it being the whole of me.
That's lovely to hear. Very exciting.
Yeah. So, what
Mhm.
kind of advice would you give to somebody who is just starting out with this idea of being creative?
Just just go just Don't worry about showing it to anyone else. Just just keep doing stuff and realize that just like the old gold prospectors in the mountains, they had to sift through a lot of mud to get their flecks of gold. But if you keep doing it, you just get more and more and more gold because you get more and more practiced, you get more and more knowledgeable about what you like, what your taste is. You start developing your own style, and more gold comes through. But at first, particularly, and even when you're far away along, having been doing it for years, like I have, there are times where it just doesn't come out the way you want to. It's not up to you. Don't take it all so personally. And don't worry about it not everything being great. You don't have to hang everything on the wall. If you went and visited Picasso's studio, when you first go in the front bit, you'll see all the masterpieces. You think, fuck, Picasso is the most amazing artist that ever lived. And then if you go further into the studio, you'll see some stuff which isn't the absolute cream, but it's still pretty damn good. And you go, wow, he's still fantastic. But then you go further and you see a bunch of stuff that nearly worked, but wasn't quite. And then if you go even further, leaning up behind the photocopier, there's some shit that did not fucking work at all. It's just that the public never see it.
Yeah, we see the
Everybody,
edited.
the Beatles and Jimi Hendrix and Bjork all had very average album tracks, as well as the amazing hits. If you want to have All You Need Is Love, you also have to have Octopus's Garden. Everybody has to be okay doing mediocre stuff or doing stuff that didn't actually work, so that the flow carries on. You don't, if you're too busy editing it right at the beginning as it's coming through, you will turn the river into a trickle.
Mm.
You want to keep it as a river, let it come through. Let that be another country and western song you don't like that much. Let that be another picture of a thing that didn't quite work. Let it all keep coming through and coming through and coming through, and you'll have your best chance that a piece of genius will come through on the tide. So don't edit it too much. Let it all pour out.
And you learn along the way. You by experimenting and playing, you learn about what your particular style is and what turns you on and what you want to do more of.
Yeah, exactly. Absolutely.
So you
Mm,
have Game Changers coming up. You have enrollment open right now for March. Is that
yeah,
correct?
March.
Can you say a
Yeah.
little bit about what Game Changers is?
Game Changer is getting together with a very little closed group of like about 20 people and me for 20 weeks on Thursdays, 2 hours on each Thursday, playing one of my creative or shadow work games and making some lifelong friends along the way that don't need you to be tidy or fine or, anything other than your actual authentic self. It's very authentic. It's very funny. There's a lot of laughter and lightening up the whole growing process and creative process. It's very light, turning everything that's been made into a big deal into a much smaller deal. Yeah, and it's a lovely closed group for my 20 best games on the pirate ship. We call it a pirate ship. And at the end, usually everybody mutinies and says we're carrying on. And after the 20 weeks, they just go on a different Zoom every week. And it's just creating a wonderful family of creativity, of shadow work, of healing, of intimacy, of laughter, while going really deep over 20 weeks. Yeah, it's great. 2 hour sessions.
Yeah, and I have found you to be a very generous and really vulnerable teacher. I've noticed in the Ram Dass video that it wasn't just about you showing his spirituality and his accomplishment. You were also really vulnerable in talking about him as a father figure for you.
Yeah. Yeah. I was trying, I was also trying to manipulate him into naming me as his successor, which I failed to do. But whenever I give talks after that movie in cinemas and Q&A things, I always pretend that he did actually name me. I always say, I think it's obvious to everyone who watched that film, isn't it, that he was naming me as his successor.
Of course, yes. So what are you working on now?
Ah, interestingly, I've got a fairy story coming out this year, which is going to be a lovely kids book or kid adult book about this fairy that met a musician and is illustrated by this wonderful Japanese illustrator called Kanako. That's coming out this year, as is this new album we've just finished called All Heart, which is this beautiful, slightly worldy, groovy, very beautifully crafted album. So that's coming out. And I'm just starting working on a new movie, which is to celebrate the archetype, to celebrate the fool, to celebrate the clown, the jester, the depth. The sacred fool archetype is that, which is what I think I belong to, is people that aren't afraid to fall flat on their face in front of everyone to bring some truth into the room. So everybody is like, oh, we mustn't talk about this. We mustn't talk about the elephant in the room. We mustn't talk about the elephant in the room. And then you and me will walk into the room and go, hey, who left this elephant here? And everyone's like, oh, that's our job as the fool,
Yes.
is to be low status enough to fall flat on our face and let go of all sort of superficiality and looking perfect in order to bring everyone into authenticity. And that's what Laurel and Hardy, Charlie Chaplin, all the greats of old, all were doing that same high status, low status thing. And I know a lot of physical theatre and clowny people. I train hospital clowns, which are clowns that go in and work with, ill and dying kids. And they are all about the shadow work. That's why I train them. I don't train them in clowning. I train them in shadow work, which is so important for a clown,
Mm.
and masks and everything like that. And so I'm making a film basically celebrating that with all the best physical theatre and all the best mime artists and all the best clowns. And I don't mean kind of clowns with a red nose necessarily that, that go honk honk in a circus. It's the deeper kind of side of it and physical theatre and some of the old. I want to see if I can find some great old footage of some of the greats talking about the depth of it, And it's a movie called Awkward that I'm going into pre-production or development in this week, actually. I've got lots of interviews with different clowns to ask them what is it that people don't really understand about clowns, and then we really get into the meat.
Wonderful. That sounds fascinating.
Mm.
So, is there something that you have never tried that you think that you would like to at some point?
Yes, I'm just starting it actually now, which is to write a comedy script, to do some fiction.
Hmm.
I haven't, apart from stories like fairy stories, I haven't actually done fiction where other adults acted out. And I have an idea that I'm just starting, and I'm not sure it's coming that quickly to me. Like I can think up the scenario, but I think if I was going to direct something fictional, I'd be a little bit more like Woody Allen in the sense that the actual literal, like Tarantino wants his actors to say the words as written, word for word.
Hmm.
Whereas Woody Allen is like, look, she's upset with him. You have to get to a point at the end where he storms out and she picks up the phone. But however you get there, whatever feels authentic, if you need to change some of the lines around, whatever feels natural for you to get there, get there. That's how I think I would probably do my direction more.
Yeah, it's choosing the people that you want to collaborate with and allowing them to contribute,
Yeah,
really trusting that it'll be a collaboration. It's not just all one person's vision. I love that.
sure. Yeah.
So, would you have a little taste of an exercise to offer our listeners before we end?
Oh, goodness. What can I give you that's quick? Oh, actually, yeah, I'll give you just a very simple thing, actually.
Okay,
I'm going to give you one exercise and one recommendation.
great.
My one recommendation is if you want to do one thing that's going to create enormous change in your life, be incredibly observant on your self-talk. Focus your attention on the way that you speak to yourself on a day-to-day level and make it kinder.
Mm.
Make it less judgmental, less frustrated, less exasperated, more patient. Because you have some very young parts inside you, and they only thrive through patience, encouragement, and yeah, gentleness. So notice your self-talk and bring as much patience, encouragement, and gentleness as you can to it. It's a big challenge for a lot of people that's just not used to it. Feels like it would be an indulgent thing to do, but if you do it, it will have immense effect on your life and on the way people treat you. So that's the first thing. And the exercise I'd recommend, which is it's not the most kind of creative and wacky. You have to come to the Game Changer for that. And that's the Game Changer is my name, Jamie Catto /Game Changer, I think is the easiest way to find it. Maybe it'll be in the notes of this podcast, but
Yes, jamiecatto.com/game changer, and it will be
oh,
in the
great.
notes.
And the exercise I would give you now is three things, three times. Whenever you are using a key, or when and not or, whenever you're using a key, and whenever you're using a tap, or what you would call a faucet, and whenever you're using steps and stairs or stairs, stop and have 45 seconds of total presence, of being in this moment, noticing how you're breathing, noticing how you're feeling, noticing what you're thinking, noticing the birds are tweeting on the trees, the cars driving past, the snippet of the conversation of that couple as they pass. Have 45 seconds of uber macro presence and then get on with your day. But just for a week or for your rest of your life, whenever you are dealing with steps and stairs or a key or a faucet, give yourself that 45 seconds of total stopping and total presence. Again, that will give you probably 10 or 20 little mini meditations a day, which is much, much better than one 20-minute meditation.
When I used to go to Unity Church, which was basically about meditation, they taught something called the Golden Key. And so if you notice a habit that you want to change, use that to remind you to do the new thing. So you could actually combine what you just said. Whenever I notice that I'm being hard on myself, to take 45 seconds.
Yeah, add that on the list too.
Yes. Yeah, because that can really start to retrain if you link the two together.
Yeah.
Lovely.
I'm still going to insist that you come and join the Game Changer. It's not over.
Yes. Thank you so much, Jamie. This has been wonderful. I love hearing about all your creative adventures and what you're offering to people. One thing that I read, I think this was from Wikipedia, said that your workshops are playful and inspiring shadow work experiences that open the channel straight to flow state.
Oh, wow, that's cool. I don't think I wrote that.
And thank you so much for joining me today.
It's beautiful. And exactly, let's just keep on talking. Thanks for everyone who's listening. And yeah, come and play and let's stop taking all this self-development so seriously.
Yes. So that was the end of this episode of Playful Presence. Jamie talks about something he calls God's deaf waiters. And really the invitation is to think about one of your big dreams and take action, whether it's big or small. And the universe will notice and come to support you. Things start to happen when you take some kind of action towards your biggest dreams. Once again, if you're interested in signing up for my newsletter or scheduling a free coaching session, you can go to tajbaker.com. Thank you to Robin Jackson for writing and performing the music you hear at the top of the show. And thanks again for listening to Playful Presence. And thanks again for listening to Playful Presence.